Testing high availability in Hyper-V Server 2016 failover clustering. Okay, as you can see, I have a failover cluster called Hypercluster 1, and inside this Hypercluster 1, I have three Hyper-V hosts, nodes, Hyper 1, Hyper 2, and Hyper 3, and these three nodes slash Hyper-V hosts, which are part of a cluster called Hypercluster 1, they are hosting four guest VMs, server 1, server 2, server 3, and server 4. If you notice, server 1, server 2, and server 3 currently are running on host Hyper 3 or node Hyper 3, and the restart priority for server 1 is high, server 2 is medium, server 3 is low. Means, in case if server 3 fails or Hyper 3 fails, how it fails depends. It could be anything. It could be hardware failure. It could be, let's say, server get crashed or lost access to storage or whatever happens, or just power, lost power or electricity or whatever. So if server, or if in case if host Hyper 3 goes down, server 1, server 2, and server 3, as these machines are configured as highly available VMs, they will automatically be restarted on other host. In our case, either they will be restarted on Hyper 2 or Hyper 3, sorry, on Hyper 2 or Hyper 1, or vice versa. Because that's what failover clustering is all about, right? So if we lose a host, VM that were running on that host will automatically be restarted on other available nodes. So if Hyper 3 goes down, these VM will be restarted on Hyper 1 and Hyper 2. And how, which one will be selected, it depends on Hyper-V. It will do the automatic calculation to choose the best possible node to start those VMs. Remember the load balancing. Okay, let's see a scenario, or let's test this failover clustering. So what I will do, I will simulate the failure of Hyper 3 by powering it off. So when I power Hyper 3 off or Hyper 3 node off, these VMs, server 1, server 2, and server 3 should also go down because currently they are running on node Hyper 3. When they will go down, as these VMs are highly available and running in a failover cluster, these VMs will be restarted, right, on remaining nodes, which are Hyper 1 and Hyper 2. And as per the restart priority, server 1 should be the first one to start, server 2 will be the second one to start, and server 3 will be the third one to start. How long it will take, it depends on your cluster settings. For example, if you select Hypercluster 1, right, and go down all the way here, properties, it will show you the cluster details, it dependencies, as well as policies, like how to respond, the time settings for failover, failback, when to retry. For example, as you can see, if resource fails, attempt restart on current node. Period for restart is 15 minutes. Maximum restart in 15 minutes, which is a specified interval, is 1. Delay between restart is zero point 0.5. If restart is unsuccessful, fail over resources in this row. If all restart attempts fail, begin restarting again after 1 hour. And pending timeout is the length of time that resource can take, changes to detect to, to take change states between online and offline before the cluster service put back to the failed state. So pending timeout by default is 3 minutes. There are some advanced policies as well. If you don't want, this node to host resources in this cluster, these are the possible owners. But if I want to, don't want to use one of the node, I can deselect here. Standard time period for resource type, that's for the health check. And these are the thorough health check for these cluster. Okay, keep this in mind. If you want to go through this dialog box, you have to select this and then the properties. If you just right click here and say properties, you'll get totally different box. It's the box of the load balancing like I've shown you before in another video. Also, if you go to roles and if you right click a VM and go to properties, you will see the preferred owner. Here you can specify the preferred owner that you want the server one to, let's say, always be preferred to be running on Hyper One. If Hyper One is not available, then it's another story. But when Hyper One is available, you would like it to run on Hyper One, for example. And failover settings. Failover settings is specify the number of time that the failover with the cluster service will attempt to restart or fail over the cluster node. Maximum failure are 2 over the period of 6. So within the 6 hours, if this role fails more than twice, it will remain in failed state. I can change this number, decrease it or increase it. And what about the failback? By default, failback is not selected. Means suppose it was running on Hyper 1 and Hyper 1 fails. Machine, this VM server 1 restarted on Hyper 2, right? And stay there for 2 hours and then Hyper 1 comes back. Would you like this VM to fail back to Hyper 1? If you want, then you can select what would you like. You would like to fail back between the time period or immediately, or you can prevent failback. I'll leave it for automatic VM resource and load balancing feature of failover clustering. Okay, now let's test this. So we have server 1, server 2, server 3, these 3 VMs with the priority of high, medium, and low. They are running on Hyper 3. So what I will do, I will go to this VM Hyper 3 and say power off. And boom, power it off. And here you can see it's all live. And as you can see, the status of server 1, server 2, and server 3 changed from running to unmonitored. And the reason is because those VMs, heartbeat is not getting detected because those VMs are down. Now, if I go to nodes, same thing happens to Hyper 3 and the status is changed to isolated. Sorry, status changed to down and isolated. Means no heartbeat is received from Hyper 3. Hyper 1 and Hyper 2 are up, but Hyper 3 is not accessible. So as per the cluster settings, it will try, and try. So it usually takes like 3 to 5 minutes with the default settings, as we have seen those parameters. And after that, it will starting these VMs on other host For example, Hyper 3 is down. So if I go to, for example, Hyper-V Manager in Hyper 1, server 4 is there. No sign of server 1, 2, and 3. So if I go to Hyper 2 and refresh, no sign of any VM. So nothing has been started yet, right? So let's wait. It will take a while. I can pause this video, but I don't want to. I would like this video to go as it is, totally live, so you can see how long it's taking by default with default settings for high priority VM to come up in case if there is a host failure, how long it will take for a VM with high priority startup settings to come up under default settings, of course. So as you can see, high, medium, low, all three are down at the moment. So for server 4 is still running because it was running on Hyper 1 and Hyper 1 is still up. As you can see, Hyper 1 and Hyper 2 are up, Hyper 3 is down, changed to isolated, and these VMs will be restarting shortly because that's what failover clustering is all about. So let's say user were accessing these servers, let's say server 1, and all of a sudden they face that they can't access it. What they will do, they will call the service desk. They'll say, I don't have access to the server, I can't connect. And this will be not just a single call because it's a server problem. So multiple number of users will be sending an email and this. And here you can see server 1 and then server 2 and now server 3. Boom. So roughly around 3 to 4 minutes and they are back. So whenever there is a problem at server side, multiple users will be affecting. So when these machines will be going down, service desk will be ringing and ringing and ringing. People will be calling that can't access to server. E Whether you will receive email or not, it depends that the server or VM which went down, was it a mail server or not? So users usually, or a monitoring system, if it's not running on VM, it may detect that these server VMs are down. So as you can see, long story short, VMs are back and connection is restored. So as you can see now, server 1 and server 2 got Hyper 2 and server 3 got Hyper 1. See, load balancing. It balanced the load. It made sure that both of servers have equal amount of VMs. So just to see that we are all good, connecting to server 1, and we can say sorry about that because it's, yep, it's up. It's just the console, it just took a while to connect. So server 1 is up, server 2, server 3, server 4 already up. So you see, machines get restarted and as per the priority. How to change the startup priorities? As I mentioned in previous video, let me show you again. If you think server 3 should come up earlier, then you can change the priority from low to medium or high by right-clicking, change startup priority, and choose either medium or high. Currently it's set to low. If you select to no auto start, then if this VM goes down because of host failure, this VM will not be automatically restarted. You have to manually start this VM to come up. So that's what startup priorities are, and that's how high availability works in Hyper-V Server 2016 failover clustering. Thank you so much, and please do subscribe, and I will see you in another video. Take it easy.